No improvement.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Chasing Lullabies, where we try to engage in a more wholesome, holistic way with the text and of the weekly parsha. This week, just going to make sure that Zoom doesn't interrupt us. There we go.
All right.
Okay, so this week we are kind of shifting gear a little bit. We're taking things to the next level of our investigation of the Torah text. I would say until now, we have been taking insights from text, and it's really been about trying to see the text in a more adult fashion, that there are passages, there are parts which can speak to me, which can be opened up, which can be really related to in an entirely different way, possibly than we've ever done before. What we do this week is we up the gear a little bit, because what we're doing this week is we're not only looking at the text, but we're starting to look at the characters themselves. We're starting to look at the people who dominate the text, who live inside the text, the characters themselves. And we're starting to ask difficult questions about their lives, about what they were doing. And as a result, to engage with the lessons that their narrative teaches us, that their lives teach us. And I think this is where it can start to get even more challenging, because we're no longer dealing with in the world of ideas alone. We're dealing in the much more messy and much more real world of human frailty. And so this week we start to open up that part as we engage with, I think, some of the most tricky passages of the entire Torah, which is the frailty of the children of Israel as they journey through the desert. And we begin actually in this week's parsha, the descent of that generation. They've gone to an amazing high. They have been redeemed from slavery. They've been taken out through the desert to Mount Sinai. They've received the Torah, and then the fall. And this is the part where we have to, I suppose, resonate with our own humanity and learn from the humanity of our heroes something about our own lives. The foibles and follies of the past can help us resonate, can help us to learn about the present as well. For me, growing up, looking at the children of Israel, they always seemed almost pathetic, to be honest. They've just had these amazing experiences, like things that we would have never dreamed of. Forget the Ten Commandments, forget the movies, forget all the different portrayals that we've had from Hollywood, from art, from any sort of imagination. They lived through it. They lived through the Exodus. They lived through Mount Sinai. And then they start complaining. They start complaining. I mean, excuse my language. It feels pathetic. It feels like, how am I to learn from these people? Are they so small? And what do they complain about? This week's parsha, it takes the biscuit, to be honest. They're complaining because they don't have the food of Egypt. Oh, for the fish, for the cucumbers, the watermelon, the leeks, for the delicious, sumptuous food of slavery. It was so good back there. We wish we had the good of Egypt. And then they want meat. Amidst all this, they want meat. Meat. And in this week's parsha, we learn how their wish is granted. There's this influx of quail. It's amazing, by the way, because I think you only have quail in the finest restaurants in town. You know, the tiny quail's egg gently put on top of the haute cuisine. But they had quail. They had a glut of quail. They had so much quail actually that they collected. The Torah tells us barrelfuls, big sacks of quails, and they just ate them. And the Medrash says they ate them without even killing them. They just ate this quail. And God wasn't exactly very happy with that. He says this is ra, this is wickedness, and there's a plague, and lots of people die. And that dynamic seems to really dominate the rest of the book of Numbers, of complaints, betrayal, rebellion, plagues, death. And these are the people that saw God, heard his name, heard his words, heard God speak to them. They had revelation. These are the people who, we are told by our sages at the time of the splitting of the sea, saw a vision of the divine, that even Ezekiel, when he saw the chariot, didn't perceive God in that level of closeness and intensity. And they want meat. They're desperate for meat. So what's going on here? How do we get past the lullaby of they're pathetic, they have nothing to say to me? They're just complainers. I'll just make a joke about Jews complaining, because that's what Jews do. And that's the best joke. That's the best joke we always make. But we never really get beyond that. So how are we going to get beyond that? So let's try tonight to see what was happening with these people that wanted meat so badly, that were complaining so viciously. Okay, so let's begin. Now, there was a food item that they had in the desert. And what was it? What were they eating? There was one thing that they were eating, and there was another thing they weren't eating. They were eating manna. That was what was granted to them as their heavenly food, this food from heaven, this bread from heaven, and they didn't have meat. It's not they weren't commanded. It's not that meat was forbidden. It just wasn't really very available in the desert at that time. And so this complaint for meat takes on an interesting sort of flavor. They're complaining, so to speak. They're complaining for meat. They're saying they had these beautiful delicacies of cucumbers and watermelons. And that food is not available. When else do we have a situation where there were people for whom one type of food was available, and yet they sought the other type of food in preference? When else in the Torah is that the case? Open to you. Just unmute and say hello. Hi, Barry.
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve, great. I think that was Simon, wasn't it, Simon?
No, it was Dan, but he beat me to it.
Okay, fine. So sorry, I'm not on gallery view, but yeah, Adam and Eve, absolutely. Way back at the very beginning, Adam and Eve, they were told you can eat from any of the fruit in the entire garden. You can eat from anything. The only thing you can't eat from is a tree of knowledge between good and evil. That's the only thing that I'm going to restrict as God from your food. And sure, but as you know, they chose the food that was forbidden to them. That was the one which brought death into the world. Anyone who eats from this tree, from the day you eat from that tree, most tamus, you shall surely die. And actually, the same eating of forbidden food brought about death in this story also, because if we see the complaints of this parsha as the beginning of the descent, we know that this begins the period of golden calf, of spies, of the downfall of that group, of that generation, who ultimately meet their untimely end in the desert, waiting for the next generation to come through. So there seems to be almost a similarity here. And what's the result of the fall with Adam and Eve? What's the result of them eating from the fruit that wasn't permitted to them?
Cain and
God
Abel.
says to them, pardon?
Cain and Abel.
Cain and Abel. Before Cain and Abel, there's a few curses or a few decrees that come about to humanity before, as a direct result of eating from the tree of knowledge between good and evil.
They were banished.
They were banished. That's right. That's right. And
Women
what?
have to go through labour pains.
Pardon? Women with labor pains. That's right. And also banished. And the garden is protected by two cherubs. We'll talk about those cherubs in a minute. And the labor pains for a lady. And what about for a gentleman? As
man has to work hard to get bread instead of it just coming to him without.
That's right. That's right. Bezeas apecha teichol lechem, through the sweat of your brow, now you will eat bread. It used to be the case that food was offered freely. Eat from all the fruit of the tree. If we think about fruit, it's kind of the quintessential godly sourced food because it's in its entirely edible form at this point. It can just be plucked off the tree and eaten. Bread is the exact opposite. It has to go through multiple processes of human labor and our activity in order to make it edible. First, you have to plant the seed. So first, you have to plow the ground, make sure the ground is ready to plant the seeds. Sow the seeds, cover the seeds with earth, irrigate the seeds, allow them to grow, harvest them, take off the wheat from the chaff, go through the process of grinding, kneading, raising, baking. There's an entire process of human labor that goes into bread, which is probably one of the most processed foods, if you think about it, that we have. I mean, we live in a world of entirely industrial food production, but if you think about prior to industrial food processes, bread is one of the most labor intensive foods that we have. And so the response of rejecting the fruit is to receive now the requirement of bread making. You want to eat your food, says God? Go for it. Be entirely in control of that process. Now you're going to have to work for your food. And then there's a moment where that can be redeemed, because how is manna described? We're now in the desert. We're now a few thousand years after the sin of Adam and Eve, and the Bnei Israel, they've left Egypt and Seder lo asu lehem. They didn't make packed lunches. They had a few matzahs, but they didn't have enough food. So we've got 3 million people in the desert, and we don't know how to feed them. Now, if you ever thought about one of the most fundamental requirements of any endeavor, it's like you have the navy and you've got the merchant navy. You've got your fighters, but if there's nothing to feed them, so that's the end of your war. So here also, if you don't have anything to feed the camp in the desert, we have the end of the Israel story. And so what does God feed them? He feeds them manna. How's manna described? Anyone?
Coriander seed.
Yeah, coriander seed. That's this week's parsha. We'll talk about that in a second. But
It's like
also
a white sticky honey wafer, wasn't it?
That's right. It's described as that in this week's parsha, but it's called lechem. It's called bread.
I had this.
Lechem Hashem. Pardon?
I heard it described this as something that you can close your eyes and imagine it to be anything you want.
That's right.
Those a special quality about it. Yeah.
That's right. Our sages tell us that you could think about a rump steak when they did porridging, and it would taste like a rump steak. You could think about mac and cheese, and it would taste like mac and cheese. I'm going to give you just a hint, by the way. There's one other food item. That tastes that its taste depends upon something, or rather, its taste changes, and sometimes it can taste like this, and sometimes it can taste like that. Anyone know what food item that might be? There's one food item which we have today that's taste changes from time to time.
Mango can taste different whether it's fresh or dried.
Say again?
Mango tastes completely different when it's fresh or dry.
That's
It's
true.
sweet when it's juicy, and it's sour when it's dry.
That's true. But I think something even more variable. Sometimes it can really go from one thing to the other. Any ideas? So Shoshana's here. She's whispering to me.
Tofu.
Pardon?
Tofu.
Tofu. Well, that's because tofu doesn't taste of anything. It just takes on the flavor of what it's cooked in. So you cook it in soy sauce, it's basically soft soy sauce. If you cook it in something else, it's soft that. Now, what I'm thinking about is breast milk. That breast milk takes on the flavor of what mum's eaten.
Yes, it does.
So, and it takes on the nutritional value also of what mum's eaten.
Not
So
just of what the baby needs. It takes on the nutritional value of what the baby needs.
my wife's telling me that it also takes on the nutritional value of what the baby needs. So
Absolutely.
so what maybe we will just kind of hold on to all these ideas, because if you think about what manna was essentially a bit like breast milk, because it exactly met the nutritional needs of the Jews. By the way, anyone who's ever wondered how did an encampment of 3 million people manage sanitation in the desert? Well, when you have all your nutritional needs met with a certain substance, and there's no waste in that food. All of the food is supporting the nutrition of the organism, so there is no need for waste. It's not like it was a miracle necessarily that there was no waste in the desert. They were having miraculous food that therefore produced no waste. It's also like when you think about a newborn baby's nappies who's exclusively breastfed, so then it's an entirely different nappy because it doesn't have very much waste in it. It's almost sweet smelling. It's actually halachically different, that even though you can't daven around a baby who's on solids because of possible odors, you can daven around a baby who's exclusively breastfed because it's not an offensive odor. It's not a waste. It's not a waste product.
And it's a bit like horses. It's actually not a bad odor. It's not, doesn't. Well, I suppose it depends on, but it's not as bad as, for example, a dog or
Because they're vegetarians.
Yeah.
Vegetarian animals don't smell as bad as meat eaters.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna move us away slightly from this discussion because I think it's causing us a bit of a squeam. But yes. But the point is over here is that I want to hear an idea that will develop over the next few minutes, and about the idea that manna has a kinship to breast milk, and that the needs of the Jewish people, the needs of the people of Israel, were directly met with this bread from heaven, a bread from heaven. Now that's amazing, isn't it? Because up until this point in time, we were receiving our sustenance from bread that we had to work for, in place of the fruit that we were offered in the Garden of Eden. The fruit was freely given. We rejected that gift of food because we wanted our own food. We were not content with the gifts of God to have what was offered in the Garden of Eden. We had to make our own. We had to take it into our own hands. So God says, fine, take it into your own hands. And then that's remedied because now we're given food from bread from heaven now, entirely like what we have to work for, but freely given. It's almost a rectification of that sin. And yet, once again, we reject that food and we say, we don't want your bread. We don't want your breast milk. We don't want that. We'd rather have some meat. By the way, Rashi, on the different things that the Jewish people say they don't want, they like remember the leeks in Egypt. They remember the garlic in Egypt. They remember the cucumbers in Egypt. Rashi says those are all things that make breast milk taste sour. There's only a few things. That's what he says. Yeah. There's only a few things that Rashi says. Sorry, there's only a few things that make breast milk taste sour, and these are the things that Rashi tells us would make breast milk taste sour. And they wanted that. They wanted to spit out sour tasting breast milk in favor of their meat. Okay, so what's going on here? Now I want us to look at some text, because we're actually going to see some amazing connections to the Garden of Eden in the text itself. So let's just do a screen share. So don't take my word for it necessarily, just about the comparison in terms of themes, an external sort of thing that comes out the text. Let's have a look at the text itself. There's going to be two parts to the text. There's going to be the first part, there's going to be a tipping point, there's going to be a second part. Okay, so I just want you to listen to this text and to hear if there's any repeated words. I'll say the first half, that you'll see any repeated words, and I'll say the second half. Moshe said to Chovav, the son of Reuel, which is another name for Yitro, his father-in-law, Hamidyani Chote Moshe, the father-in-law of Moshe. We're traveling to the place that God said, that he's going to give to, that I will give to you. Come with us, and it'll be good for you. Because God said good on Israel. And Yitro said to Moses, Lo elech, I'm not going to come with you. Because I'm going to go back to my lands and to my birthplace. He says, Moses says back to his father-in-law, don't leave us. Because you know our encampment in the desert, and you will be eyes, literally eyes to us, you'll be our guide. And it was, and it will be, if you go with us, it will be this good. Then this good that this good that God does good for us, it will be good for you too. You get to partake of that good if you come with us. And they journeyed from the mountain of the Lord, a journey of 3 days. And the ark of the covenant of God traveled before them, 3 days ahead of them, to find for them a place to rest. Okay, so we'll just pause there. We'll say that say the first part. Has there been any word that has just been repeated, I think 5 times?
Tov, good.
That's right, Tov, good. Okay, so we've got a repetition somehow of good. He says the good that God did to us, the good that will come to you, God will be good to you and he's good to us. There's loads of good coming over here. Now remember, this is talking about the triumphs, the heights, the happiness that the Jewish people, that the children of Israel had experienced as they were on their way from the mountain of God, as they're on their way from Har Sinai. They've just received the Torah and they're on their way to the promised land. They're actually only 11 days journey from the promised land at this point. They're on the cusp of achieving absolute greatness. So there's all this good. Okay. And so then there is a shift. We have a very famous verse over here. It's the verse that we say when we open the ark. And then there's the verse of Nucha Yomar Shuva Hashem Rivos Alfei Yisrael. It's the verse we say when we close the ark. In the Torah text, these two verses are actually surrounded. These two verses are surrounded by inverted nuns. There's an upside down nun written in front of this verse, and an upside down nun written in front of at the end of the second verse. And our sages tell us again that this is a tipping point, and the nuns are there to indicate a tipping point in the parasha. Okay, so let's now read the next few verses and see if there's any sort of any themes here. We've had good, tov 5 times until now. Let's imagine. Let's see what's next. Vayiham commits onanim, and the people became like onanim, like complainers. We'll talk about this in a second, but just to make a notice, the word oinain over here, they became like complainers. They started complaining. So the root over here, aleph nun nun, is anan or oinen, and anyone who's gone through Jewish mourning might know that the first part of mourning is called aninus. So this is not necessarily to be read as complainers. It's to be they became like mourners. They were grieving for something. They'd lost something, or they felt they'd lost something. They're on their way out from the mountain. They're on their way to the promised land, but they feel like they're mourning something. They become like mourners. Ra be'oznei Hashem. It's wicked in the ears of God. Okay. Vayishma Hashem vayicha apoi, and God heard, and he gets very upset, angry. V'tiva bam eish Hashem, and then a fire came out from God. V'tochel b'ksei machane, and it started to consume in the heart of the camp. Okay, so I'm just going to skip a little ahead so that we can. So let's see the verses that we've just been talking about as we start to hear some similarities. So in verse 4 now, but the multitude among them, hit avu ta'ava, they began to desire, literally, they began to have a desire. Vayashuvu vayivku, and they came back and they cried. Gam b'nei Yisrael, even of the children of Israel, vayomu, and they said, Mi ya'achilenu basar, who will feed us meat? Zachanu es hadaga asher nocha b'Mitzrayim. We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt, chinam, easily, freely. Es hakishuim, remember the cucumbers, es avatichim, and the watermelons, es hachotzir, and the leeks, es habatzalim, and the onions, es hashumim, and the garlic. Now remember, onions and garlic, leeks, watermelons, not very good for breast milk. Okay, but they remember it. They had a desire. They desired desire. They wanted the meat. They wanted the fish. Va'ata nafsheni yavesha. By the way, whilst we're talking here, just kind of exploring this text, anyone think about any common denominators between any of all these foods? Fish, cucumbers, watermelon, leeks, onions, and garlic. Any common denominators between them?
Leeks, onions, and garlic all come from the same family, but that's the only one I can see.
And they all need a lot of water to make them grow.
Yeah, and fish definitely need a lot of water. Yeah, and all the more, a little bit more. Anything else? Are they situated above or below?
They're all either below ground or in the water.
Yeah, they're all below ground or in the water. They're all sort of hidden away. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's just keep that in mind. And
Well, no, it isn't.
On the ground.
That's on the ground, not below the ground.
okay, so the watermelon's on the ground. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Okay, so maybe that's fine. Va'ata nafshenu yavesha. And now our soul is dry. En kol bilti el amaneinenu. And we can't tolerate. We have nothing but this manna. And then that goes to we have the description of the manna that Dan and others spoke about here. Va'aman kizera gadhu, eino ke'ein habidloyach. Now the manna was like a coriander seed. Its appearance was like that of little balls or little bits of crystal. Okay, and they used to go and they used to look what they used to do with this manna. This manna, which could taste of anything, shatu ha'am. So the people walked about and they gathered it, v'loktu v'tachanu brecham, and they ground it in a mill, odachu b'maducha, or they crushed it in a pestle and mortar, ubishlu b'paro, and they cooked it in a pot, v'asu oso ugos, and they made it into cakes. 1 second. This is the food that tastes like whatever you want. It's the bread from God. And what do they do with it?
They process it.
They're processing it. Oh my goodness. They're trying to pull away from this being a fruit, this being a bread of God. They're trying to process it themselves. They're trying to make it into their own bread, not godly bread, human bread. And its taste was like the taste of some sort of oil cake. By the way, l'shod, okay, shod over here. Let me just look this one up for a second. Whilst we're talking about.
Bless you.
I was coughing, not sneezing.
So shod.
Thank you.
Not loshod, not lushod. It was tasting like oil cake, but shod alone can mean breast. It tasted like breast. Okay. When the dew came down in the camp, then the manna came down. Okay. Let's see if we can continue to hear anything that any similar or any patterns now. Vayishma Moshe es ha'am, and Moses listened to the nation. Boche lemishpechosov, and they were crying. Ish lefesach oholo, each person in their families, they're crying at their tents. Okay. Vayicha ach Hashem ma'od, and God got very upset, very angry. But in a Moshe ra, and in the eyes of Moses, it was bad. Vayomer Moshe el Hashem, lama hera'osa la'avdecha. Why have you been wicked to your servant? V'lama le'matasi chen be'inecha. Why have I not find grace in your eyes? Lasum es masa kol ha'amazeh alai, to place all this burden of this nation on me. Hanochi harisi, did I give birth? Listen to the rather still the language of childbirth. Did I give birth to this nation as kol ha'amazeh? Imanochi leditihu, did I bring it into this world? Did I birth it? Kitoma elai. Sorry, did I conceive it? Did I give birth to it? That you should say to me, I should hold it in my breast. Like a wet nurse would hold on to a child on this land. Okay, that you've sworn to the forefathers. Am I a wet nurse suckling these children? May I only basa, where would I find meat? To give to all this nation. They're crying out to me, give me meat, and I will eat it. I cannot hold on to this nation alone. It's too difficult for me. Okay, and we're just going to finish off with the final verse for the kind of the repeated phrases. If this is how you're going to do this to me, just kill me. If I find favor with you, and then I will not see my wickedness, my evil. Okay, let's pause there and let's stop there. There's been a word that has repeated itself since the tipping point. We've gone through a lot of imagery about nursing and about childbirth, but there's been also a word that has come up 4 times.
Ra?
Yeah, ra. That's right. So the first we've seen 4 ras over here. Barasi, in my wickedness, it's wicked in the eyes of God. It's ra, it's ra, it's ra. That's what happens after the tipping point. And before the tipping point, we had good, 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 good. Okay. Where else in the Torah do we see the big transition between good to ra? Good to ra.
Tree of good and evil.
That's right, the tree of good and evil. Okay, and so we now have, I think, better grounds for our hypothesis that what we're doing over here, that what we're seeing is a repeat in some level of the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. There was a possibility to rectify that. We had bread from God now, not bread that we had to make, but bread from God. And instead, there seems to be a pushing off of that bread from God. I'm going to process it myself. I'm going to spit out this milk. I don't want to be fed in this way. Let's try and put some things together now.
Maybe there's my initial thought on it would be that there's something, it appears there's something in most people that if you keep on being given something, there comes a point when you don't want it anymore and you want to be able to get it for yourself. It's part of the nature of most people that after a while that they get fed up with being given things and they want to get for themselves.
People want to be independent.
Yeah.
And also there's if you look at athletes, there's only so long they can stay at their peak. We were talking about the spiritual peak, and then they have to rest.
And there's also babies who want to be independent and wants to start fending after everything's done for them as infants. Then they start crawling away and wanting to do their own thing.
Right.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we're starting to feel out this idea of individuation, of peaking, of separation, of having our own independent existence. Okay, so let's try and see what, and actually we know that that's a process that we all go through, because as you mentioned, children want to pull back, children want to have their space, they want to be able to exist independent of their parents. So we all understand that. So let's see what it means. Let's see what sort of independence they wanted, kind of the part of independence which doesn't seem so healthy, and then also let's try and find the sort of independence which we are trying to achieve. Okay. So the first thing is, by the way, just one more connection to the Garden of Eden, which is that we saw that the tipping point here, in order to transition from the good at the beginning to the ra at the end, was the moving of the ark that went in front of the children of Israel. What was on top of the ark? There were 2 cherubs. Where's the only other time in the Torah that we talk about cherubs? It's the cherubs who guard the Garden of Eden with a revolving flaming sword. So there's something very Eden-like over here. And the Jewish people, as we mentioned, they are misowned, they become like complainers. And we said that word complainers is actually could be better translated as they become like mourners. They're mourning for something. They've lost something here. They've lost something that they did have in Egypt and they don't have right now. And what we've started to speak out is that they are missing out something very interesting. So we looked also at the verse, and it said that they start to desire. Okay, so I'm just going to try and bring up that verse one more time just to bring it out, because before they start even talking about meat, there's something else they fall into. They fall into a desire for desire itself. Okay. Here we go. They are suf and the multitude among them, this is verse 4, began hitavu ta'ava. Literally, they began to desire hitavu ta'ava. They began to desire. They began to desire, and that's when they start asking for meat. So we're still going to put together a few more pieces before we put it all together. So they began to desire. They're desiring desire. We understand that there's some sort of sense of individuation. They're mourning. They suffered some sort of loss. They're desiring desire. And so then what do they want? They want meat. They want meat. They want not just meat, but before meat, they wanted to desire meat. They want that feeling of needing meat. They want to need a need. And then they are talking about these cucumbers and watermelons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. And even if they don't grow on the ground, they all grow close to the ground. They want ground-based food. They want stuff which is below the surface. They don't want to be looking up. They don't want to be looking up for their food, the bread from heaven. They don't want heavenly bread that makes them look upwards. They want something which comes from the ground, that's close to the ground. And then they don't just want stuff from the ground that isn't connected to heaven. They want to take any food they have, want to make it their own. They want to grind it. They want to bake it. They want to make it into their own bread. They want to repeat the curse of Eden, not the blessing of fruit from heaven, not the blessing of fruit or bread freely given. They want to make it of their own. And so here now is the tipping point. Okay. And here is the big dilemma that I think they faced, because we said that there were 5 tovs, 5 goods, 5 instances of the word good, and 4 instances of the word ra. So let's see what the 5th good is. What's the 5th time that is good? It's almost the one that needs to indicate a change, because otherwise the symmetry in the verses don't seem to work out. So let's just do another screen share, and the 5th good is this one. It's further up. 1 second. No, it isn't. I'm a little bit lost. One second. So the good. Here it is. No, it isn't. Give me 1 second. Excuse me for my lack of preparation here. Here it is. Okay. 18. Oh, it's right at the end. I'm sorry. The 5th good is actually at the end of this passage. Maybe that didn't actually come out so well. Here we go. 5th good's over here, right at the end. 11:18 is apparently meant to. Yes, here it is. The Elam Tomar, to the people say, prepare yourselves for tomorrow and eat the meat. Because you cried out in the ears of God, saying, who will feed us meat? Because it was good for us in Egypt. And then God will give you meat and you shall eat. The people were saying it was good. It was good in Egypt. Was it good in Egypt? Was it good? No, it wasn't good in Egypt. Infanticide isn't good. Slavery is not good. What's the fantasy that they are holding on to that is making them perceive Egypt as good? There's something which is twisted here. So let's put it together. They wanted to want. Here's how I've been thinking about it when I've been preparing for today's session. I've been quite open with most of the people in the shul about certain life choices, say, that I make, as just as an example, and I'm really not picking out anyone or trying to make anyone feel guilty or anything like that. I'm just sharing. I don't watch TV or I don't watch films. Now, sometimes, irrespective of whether I ever have time to watch a movie, because I don't have any time, but sometimes people say to me, Rabbi, why don't you just, why be so serious? Or why not just like let loose a bit, relax a bit? And I say to them, oh, who has time? I've got lots of wonderful things to do. I really enjoy, isn't it a bit, they say, isn't it boring, Rabbi? Isn't it boring just kind of, I don't know, learning and cycling and whatever and helping people all day? Isn't that just like, you need to kick back a bit? And I say, no, that's the best. That's exactly what I want to be doing. Like, why would I want to do anything else? Okay, so that's my kind of nice rabbinic answer. But there is a small part of me which says, yeah, it would be nice just to watch the Avengers. No high quality stuff over here. Don't worry. I'm not really like thinking about some kind of interesting film or theater. If I want to kick back, I just want to see Thor hitting people. That's really what I want. Anyway, so like, wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't that be just great? I could just sit for 2.5 hours of mindless garbage. That would be just like, I could literally, it would just be great. Seriously, I could just sit. And there's a part of me which thinks you're right. That would be unbelievable. And I have that little part. And actually, it's a part I think that we all have. That let's imagine that I really want to shout because I'm getting angry, and I just really want to raise my voice, and I'm holding on to my anger, and it's tough. It's flipping hard because my temper is really starting to get higher and higher, and actually the stimulus for the anger isn't going away. It's not like that's left. In actual fact, that stimulus is only pushing my buttons harder and harder. Now, I know after I shout, I feel horrible because I'll look at the faces of the people who I've shouted at, and I'll know that they are seeing a monster. So I know, and I don't feel good about myself. I feel rubbish. I feel absolutely horrible for the effect of that. And I don't like who I am when I'm angry. Now, and so I know that before the event, I'm holding on and I'm trying really hard. After the event, I feel really bad. But there is a moment in the middle, it's almost a split second where I let go. I desire, where I let go of my anger, and that feels blissful. That feels amazing. Not the anger itself, it's the letting go to then become angry and then feel bad. But the moment of actually letting go, that's a desire that is amazing. It's that middle stage. So yes, in terms of the TV stuff or the film stuff, the same thing. After watching a movie, I feel like, why did I lose all that sleep? Or why did I waste my time? What was the point? But the moment of letting go feels fantastic. And I think that's the case with any time we're holding ourselves in check. We know that we're trying to hold on to something better. After the event, we feel like we've failed ourselves. But in the moment, in the point of desire itself, of pure unbridled desire, when we give into that desire, when we flirt with that, when we touch that it's almost nice to be needy. It's almost nice to have that emptiness that needs filling. Not because we like the addictions, the drives, the comfort seeking. No, all of that is what we'd really rather not have. But the actual moment of giving into a need is almost addictive. That in itself drives the feeling, drives the emotion. The children of Israel are being provided breast milk. They're being provided purity. They're being provided something which is, they don't need anything. They are full. They are whole. Their well-being is through the roof. They've never been such full human beings. But they're mourning the loss of their neediness. Not because it's nice to have to deal with the needs, not because it's nice to give, not because it's nice to have the results of the needs, but giving into a need, flirting with blackness. Oh, that feels really good. A little bit of desiring desire. So they spit the milk out. They try and process the manna. Let's make it my own. Let's run away. Let's go from good to bad. Because feeling whole has a loss. It's the loss of those moments. So what is the correct response? How does one individuate healthily? So when we how does one spit out the milk? How does one wean oneself off, retain one's wholeness at the same time? So we saw in the verses that they traveled 3 days from Mount Sinai. Our sages say that it says that they traveled 3 days from the mountain of the Lord. Why is it still called the mountain of the Lord? Why do they travel away from the mountain of the Lord? So the Medrash says they ran away from Mount Sinai like children on the last day of school. Terms out, they're ready to go. I remember in the City of London, our headmaster used to always end the final term assembly by saying, "Have a good holiday." And then he'd finish and we'd all say it with him, "But not too good." And then everyone would get up and we'd just run out of the Great Hall, and we'd leave the big organ at the front all behind, and everyone was very just excited to run out of school. The Jewish people run away from Mount Sinai. They're desperate to leave. Why? Well, there's two ways that one can take the messages of one's parents. There's two ways that one can imbibe milk. There's simply to be left with an ideology, to be left with something that was imparted to me, that was given to me. Almost like a tick box book of traditions, of things that we do. This is what mum and dad always did. This is what grandma and grandpa always did. This is what I do now. That feels comfortable. That feels all right. It's an ideology that I can live with. It's like I take my drink and I go. But then it's just me as an individual who has left and doesn't seek to have any further relationship. That's ideology. It's just a tick box. Then there's something called idealism. It's something where I live for a set of values, where I don't just imbibe, drink, and leave, but I take the messages, I take the values that I was being given, and I start to have to jibe with them in my own way. I have to live what it means to be a drinker of manna and then an adult who has drunk. I have to continue to relate to Mount Sinai even as I walk away from it. I have to live with a set of ideals that constantly call upon me to judge every situation, to live with a God awareness, to live with that awareness of the fact that I was given milk and I continue to be sustained from that milk even if I'm no longer drinking. That's much harder. That's heavier. And for sure, that means living with all that well-being, all that wholeness, but no longer needing the darkness, no longer needing to need those moments. And so, for me, there's a message here about how we take something, how we take a concept, how we take the Torah. Do we take it as breast milk that we drink, spit, and move on? Unfortunately, that seems to be the way of many of us. We went to Cheder, we did the youth groups, we did the bits and pieces, the booze for Jews, the lunch and learns. It's something we do. It's just an ideology that we subscribe to. But it's not something that we imbibe. It's something we imbibe. We just drink, and then we carry on with wherever we were at. We just spit it out again and carry on grinding our bread, desiring the desire, needing to be needy because it feels really quite good. And then there's another way, which is harder, which is saying in every moment, what would God want from me now? How can I design my life with all the differences, all the changes that come into it? How can I design my life in each moment to accord to those values? How can I eat meat but still have been a drinker of milk? How can I grind bread but still appreciate the gifts from heaven? How can I have both of those parts? That's the challenge that faced the children of Israel. I think that's the challenge that we all face. So thank you for coming on today to chasing away those lullabies. They don't seem so pathetic, these children of Israel. They sound really very real. They sound like people who struggled with the frailty of humanity, with what it would mean to give up on the neediness, to give up on the blackness, to miss out on those moments of giving in. Those moments when I say, oh, fine. And then regret it afterwards, but in that moment, feel great. They sound like it's very difficult for them to hold on to wholeness and well-being and completion in the face of mourning the past, mourning those moments. How can we healthily mourn those things that we lose as we grow and focus on the things that really matter? To say mourn the Avengers in place of holding on to something else which is more important. How can we sacrifice healthily on the way to greatness? So I think I'm going to chase the lullaby away at that point and leave you with your own thoughts. Because I think we've all experienced that. We've all experienced changes which require sacrifice. Heck, even a marriage, that's a sacrifice of everybody else, at least of that gender, for the purposes of one. That's something very interesting. We all understand that. We can all get behind that concept. Otherwise, you don't have a marriage. But then there's also a loss. Every growth, every moment of growth has a loss associated with it. And that's the struggle. And I'm going to stop talking now. I want to open up for any comments and questions for the last 5 minutes. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
I heard another interpretation of what happened in Sinai is that if you can imagine being born as a slave and all you've ever known is being a slave, and suddenly they say, actually, no, you're not, you don't have to be a slave anymore, you're free. And maybe they just couldn't cope with that concept. You know, it was a massive change for them, you know, and it took, and perhaps that's why it had to be another generation before they could get to the land of Israel.
So I think that's interesting. So then we have to wonder, what was it that held them back? You know, I understand they have a slave mentality, and I understand that it's almost comforting to be held within a certain framework, but they were being held within another framework. It's not like it was everything goes. As you know, from a Jewish perspective, there's a very kind of containing framework also. But I think here we're being kind of given a greater insight into what they were holding on to and what they couldn't let go of. It's almost like we can't let go of what we once were in order to be something a little bit bigger. I can't let go of that smallness almost, because it feels good. It does feel nice. It feels good. Those moments of letting go, those moments of being a slave, of being small, those feel good. So I can't let go of that. I have to grieve for those losses in a way that they couldn't move on. They're stuck in a never-ending cycle of grief for the life that they once had, where they were able to let go.
There's
and
also
they haven't got enough to hold on to become bigger. Yes.
There's also a concept of divine discontent, in that Hashem has put into us
Penny.
the need to keep striving. Sorry, yes, it's me. Of divine discontent, so that even if Hashem is giving you everything you want, because there's something in our makeup that makes us want to strive for something else, that even if you're getting everything you want and everything you need, you still want more. That could also be an answer for what happened when they wanted meat, even though they were completely satisfied with what they had. There was that spark of divine discontent that said, well, hang on a minute. Yeah, I've got this, but I need that too.
Okay. Yeah,
Just a quick comment.
Yeah.
Is that it seems peculiar that all 3 million would have gone through the same feelings at the same time. Is there any because, say for example, the spies, there's 2 that don't go along with everything. So why is there no story of anyone who went against the multitude or who disagreed with that feeling? They can't all have wanted the same thing at the same time.
So that's a good question. I don't have any kind of sources currently to answer that. I have just a couple of thoughts. One, which is that we know at the time of, say, the golden calf, that the tribe of Levi did stay somewhat separate from, did stay separate from that, from the dominant discourse of society at that point. So it sounds like there were voices of against the multitude. But also, I'm just thinking that, as you know, the voice of the crowd is very, very loud. And when people have all come from a similar background, they're all going through the same experience. When something starts to be felt, everyone starts to feel it. Look, you can see that now. What's going on with the situation following the passing of George Floyd and everything that's happening in the world. There's almost like there's a voice that is just starting to emerge from humanity, and I think that voice is almost being amplified because of the shared experience of enduring corona, whereby all humanity has been equated. We are all as susceptible, irrespective of race, location. This virus makes no differentiations between a person of color and a person who is not of anything. There's no differences. Kippur, not kippur, nothing. It's all we are one. And so there's almost like 2 different. Pardon?
I say we've all got the same blood.
That's right. And so I think as humanity now, in response to what's going on, there's this sort of voice that is emerging, a voice of unity on the one hand, but there's also a voice of, how dare you put us together? How dare you make us all one? I will uphold difference. I will maintain racial discrimination. But it's almost like those 2 voices are very ingrained. There is one, and that's because of the circumstances that we've all experienced. Now, all the more so a nation that's gone through slavery to freedom, it could be that there were, even though they weren't all saying it, they were all part of this mass experience. That might be a thought.
Okay, thank you.
Well, they didn't have any other outside influences. They were all together in the same place, weren't they? There wasn't any. Yeah.
Okay, well, certainly some things to ponder, and a call for all of us to hold on to the milk and eat the meat not quite at the same time, but at least being able to live with the idealism, with jibing with what it means to be great, enabling us to mourn healthily from the past with the decisions that we make, and strive forward as adults. Okay, good evening.
Good evening, thank you.
Good
Thank you
evening.
very much.